Ellen, that was awesome. So I've started sharing my screen so that you can see this. I will go back and forth. When I'm looking this way, my apologies, my screen is quite large. And when I share a screen, you guys pop over into the corner. Actually, there we go. I can fix that. There we go. Beautiful. So have you ever worked somewhere where you just did not fit in? I'm seeing nods already. I gotta figure out how to open the chat here. There we go. Where are you? There. So how did that feel working there? And feel free to share it in the chat. I've got the chat open now as well. So how did it feel when you were working that place that you just didn't fit in? Lonely. Oh, love that one. Uncomfortable. Yep. Lonely. That's a great one. I think that's exactly how I felt as well. I've definitely worked in those places. So now I've depressed you in the first 3 seconds of my speech. So let's turn this around. And have you ever worked somewhere where you completely fit in, where it just was the exact right place for you? And how did it feel working there? And then you can share that in the chat and we'll get a little better mood happening here. Exciting. Love it. Second family. Oh, I like that. I was blessed very early on in my career that I worked for a company where I fit in like a glove. It was a values match. We talked about values already this morning. It was a complete values match for me. I had a really great, actually more than one really great leader. And I had the feeling that I would be supported no matter what. Even when I made a mistake. Now they didn't let me away with mistakes, but they supported me anyway, because we make mistakes to grow, right? And that gave me the ability to work in a really creative way. It made me unafraid to try new things. So how awesome would it be if your team felt that way working for you, whether they're volunteers or whether it's your family, because if you hold the title parent, you're a leader. And that means grandparent, aunt, all of those things too, that still makes you a leader. So how would it feel if everyone felt that good working with you? Great, right? So we're going to talk about how to create that today. And I use the words roots. And the reason I use the word roots is because often when we're talking about leadership, we hear the words pillars of leadership or foundations of leadership. And what I see and feel when I hear those words is big, solid, unmoving buildings. And they can be really intimidating. And so if you think of yourself as a leader, is that what you want to be? Like a solid, I'm going to be unmoving and be that, what I think we used to call a boss. No, that's not what we want. Our world changes so quickly now that we need our leaders to be able to bend and shift. So the world changes, technology changes. I mean, if you were in Murav's thing before this, she talked about COVID changing everything for all of us on a dime, right? And everyone had to suddenly rally and change. Well, that was an extreme example, but even before that, when like just the changing of technology and things, it's been happening faster and faster. And so we have to adapt and update. So as leaders, what we want are roots. And when you picture roots, you picture a tree, right? So solid foundations where you know who you are, you know where you're going, but you can bend and shift as things change. Trees move with the wind. Oh, I've typed in the chat now, so there we go. So these are the 4 roots. I'm giving you the 4 roots, but we just don't have time to go through all of them today because I wanted to do a few things as we went through. So the 3 we're going to go through are the first 3. So knowing yourself, knowing the destination, and knowing your role. These are going to allow you to inspire your team and get them all working together in the same direction. So I'm not going to follow them in order. That is the order they are in the book, but I'm not going to follow the order just because of the way my stories go. They needed to go in a different order for the presentation. So we're going to start with know your role. So you remember that company that I said I worked at that I fit like a glove? It was called Magna International. They're a car parts manufacturer. And how I knew I fit in like a glove was while I was working there, I was going through my house and cleaning some things out. And I found an old paper that I'd written in university. So I went to university for human resources. I had to take a course about compensation. At the end of the course, we had to write the ideal compensation strategy for a company. Mine was exactly what Magna's compensation strategy was. So compensation strategy is pay, benefits. They did profit sharing and other things. So that their strategy was exactly what I said would be the best strategy. So this is how I knew right away. How did I didn't even remember writing that paper. So how I found them, I don't know, but it's part of why I felt so good there. So they had a vision and a mission statement, but that's not what stuck with me. And I'm just going to stop here and ask, where you're working now, or if you came here for leadership, so I'm hoping you're either in a leadership role or hoping to get into one, but do they have a vision and mission statements? Okay, awesome. Yay, Pamela. And now my next question, and you don't have to answer this one in the chat to everyone, especially if your boss is here, but do you know what it is? Oh, Ellen, love it. You have it at your church. Good. I think that's important. It doesn't matter where you are. You should have it. Church. Many of us here are Toastmasters. We have it in Toastmasters, right? And we even have values in Toastmasters as well. So that's great to hear. So Magna had something called the Magna Charter. And it was loosely based on the Magna Carta. And I'm not going to go explain what that is, but feel free to take a look. I know Peggy's a historian buff, so I know she knows what it is. Basically, it was a set of rules that anyone working there would know what to expect when working there. This thing was our Bible. It was exactly how we did all of our business. I filed in the order of the Magna Charter. When we did employee meetings, we did them in the order of the charter. So this was very much ingrained. It was a living and breathing document. And like I said, I did some of my best work for them. Part of the first part that they had in that Magna Charter was something called job security. Now there was a heading, job security, but underneath it said, no one can guarantee job security. That's not realistic. We work to guarantee job security by making a better product at a better price. A better product at a better price. Now, I was human resources, never touched a part, had nothing to do with the product. But I was reminded regularly by my bosses, by my manager and her manager and my general manager, this is the role that you play in helping to make a better product at a better price. And I understood that to mean that the employees who were touching the part were very important, and we needed to make sure that they had everything they need so they could do the best that they could. Didn't mean I was treated badly. I say that to people sometimes and they think that I was treated badly, but I wasn't. I did some really great work there. My job was really clear. I knew what I needed to do. And every month we had this employee meeting. And in the employee meeting, like I said, we would go through the charter principles and we would give updates on things. So human resources, health and safety, projects. And everyone had the opportunity during this time that you could come forward with ideas. So again, remember, better product, better price. Didn't matter if you were the custodian or if you were a general manager, you could bring forward an idea. They started to get so many ideas that they hired one person at each plant to take in the ideas. And that was their whole job. They took in the ideas, they moved forward the ones that we could work with, and they were everywhere. So the person at my plant, we're going to call him Edmund. Edmund was doing his presentation at the employee meeting, and he got up, and for the first time ever, he shared a video. Now, this is a few years ago, so it really wasn't easy to share a video. We had to bring IT in to get the video on, and anyway, it wasn't all that easy. So he shares this video, and we're like, wow, this is an odd thing for him to be doing. I said, okay, Edmund, what's this about? And the video was of, I've stolen a picture here from Action Trucks of a running board. And the running board would slide in underneath the truck when the truck was running and then slide out when you needed it. So it wasn't always stuck out and it wasn't always underneath the truck. So they were in a good spot. And he shared the video and we're all sort of wondering, what's happening here? Why is he sharing a video all of a sudden? And he said, that was pretty cool, right? How that running board comes out. And we all said, well, yeah, very cool. He says that idea came from a forklift driver at a sister plant up the road. So Magna had believed so much in the product that this forklift driver had put forward. They brought it to the engineers created it, and they sold it to market. So Magna doesn't make cars, they just make the parts. I think they actually might make a car somewhere now, but at the time we did not make cars, we just made parts. But they made this part, they created it, and they went and sold it. Pretty amazing. And they rewarded people for this, by the way. So we were rewarded if you got a good idea or you saved the company money. There was all of these gifts and things, and even a huge gala at the end of the year. Yeah, Janet, right? Awesome story. So this was there, and they were ingrained in this. They had a really strong culture. They knew who they were, and they were very clear on what they expected of you. And if you weren't meeting it, they were very clear with that too. So they're very well thought out and executed, because sometimes there's a really well thought out culture, but we don't execute it so well. But Magna did a really good job. And so I've got some little moments that I'm going to give you through this. And I had great debates on what I'd call these moments. I was going to call them tweetable moments, but now Twitter's very politically, it's a political bit of a nightmare. So I was going to call them social moments. And I thought, well, I might have some introverts in the room. So we'll just call them wisdom moments. And you feel free to do with them what you like. You can share them on social media. I'll share all of my social media contacts after. Feel free to share them on social media. But this is what I learned there. If you aren't creating your culture, it will be created for you. I'm going to say that again. If you aren't creating your culture, it will be created for you. So if we're not being careful and being really aware of the culture that we want to create in our whatever team it is, like I said, whether you're here because you're leading at Toastmasters, whether it's in your home, whether it's at your church, it's really important that you're creating that culture and that you're the one, as the leader, you're the one who has to keep that culture. So it's your responsibility to keep that culture moving forward. So if someone's not behaving within your culture, within those values that we talked about this morning, then it is your responsibility to go and deal with them. So I'll do these throughout as well. Now we know if we aren't creating our culture, it's going to be created for us. And that's a great start, but it's not enough. We need to be clear on what our role is in that. And we know, like I said, our entire worlds can change on a dime. And so how do we make sure that we're actioning what we said we will be every day, all of the time? Because the more solid we are in this, the more solid we are in these roots, the easier it is to bend and shift when the world throws whatever craziness it wants to throw at us, because it has been throwing some craziness at us in the last few years. So you don't have to answer this one out loud, but I'm just going to put the question out, and you're welcome to if you want to. But is there someone on your team right now who isn't meeting your values, or sometimes goes rogue and goes off in their own direction? And if that's the case, are you dealing with it? Or maybe you work somewhere where someone's not dealing with it. Natalie, did you want to unmute and say something?
Yeah, except I like your question.
Okay.
In terms of, what do you do about it if they're not meeting your values? But what if, I'm not saying, okay, let me go. Your question triggered something in me, so sorry.
That's okay.
It's a phenomenal question, because my question comes from, it's a question to a question, which I hate doing, but I'm going to do it.
Okay.
It's, what if you find yourself being the person that's not living up to that value, but not because you don't value it, right? So for me, and when you answer that question, I'm thinking, well, it's not that maybe they don't value it, but maybe they just demonstrate that value in a different way than I am understanding it.
Okay, beautiful. So that is important, Natalie. So I didn't touch on that in here, but thank you so much for that question, because it's really important to be clear on what the value means, because I may have a value for kindness or care for others, and what that looks like for me may look very differently for you. So maybe care for others for you means that you're going to go help them in every way possible. For me, care for other means pushing them to do it themselves. So it's really important to be clear what those values mean. And sometimes, and there was a trigger that when you started to ask your question that triggered in me too, is that sometimes we're in a situation where kind of I'll say a no-win situation, where we have a set of values and we're not behaving within them. And what I will say to you on that one, if you have a set of values and you're not behaving within your set of values, you need to look around at what's happening in your environment to not force, but that's created why you've changed your behavior. So I talked about right at the beginning, a company where you just didn't fit in. And I didn't want to stay on that too long, and I don't talk about it here, but the reason I left sort of corporate or working a 9-to-5 job is because the last job I worked at was awful. They did not meet my values. It was a terrible place for me to be, and it killed my confidence. And while at the beginning, I was just like, it's okay, we just think differently, I'm just going to deal with this. But the longer I was there and the more they would say things like, assimilate, Lisa, which in my head was, shut up, you're wrong. Like, that's what I kept hearing when they were saying that, shut up, you're wrong, and stop bringing up these ideas and stop bringing up the stuff. So after a while that like sunk in, and I found myself doing things that I would never have done before. And so when you catch yourself, if you find yourself in a situation where you're behaving outside of your values, you need to look at your environment and what's making you make those decisions. Is it fear? For me, it was just, I felt so powerless at that company that I did things, like I said, that I would have done. I ended up putting in a complaint against my GM. And that's just not something I have ever done in my life or my career. I was an HR manager. I was the one who took the complaints. So it was very odd for me to be the one putting in the complaint. Just so we're clear, there's nothing wrong with putting in a complaint. If that's where you have to go, that's where you have to go. But I'm just saying, normally in any other work environment, if I had a problem with someone, I've never felt afraid to go and confront them on my own. So for me to have to stand back and put in a complaint and have somebody else to come in to support me, that felt awful. That felt awful. So yeah, thanks, Janet. But yeah, it was not in my normal behavior, but I had to look at it and go, okay, well, what's caused this? And what caused it was I just felt so powerless there. I just felt so powerless. So I'll give the story quickly of why I started working there. Was when I went there and they interviewed me, they said, oh, good, we need someone with ideas like you. And then when I got there and I gave my ideas, they'd say, assimilate, Lisa. So they weren't who they said they were going to be. So like hindsight is 2020. I've been away from that place for a while now. And I'll tell you, there's nothing wrong with that company. I still have some friends there, but it wasn't for me. It just wasn't for me. There's some people who can handle it and who can stay and work in that environment, not me. And that's okay. It just wasn't the place for me. So, and that's okay on the other end too. It's not something I was going to talk about today, but that's okay on the other end. If you have someone on your team that really just doesn't fit, and I want to be really clear on this, this is not about personality, that their personality doesn't fit, like that they do things in a different way than you, where they really have a values mismatch, where the way they're behaving is really causing big problems for the team. Not just like they like to do things slowly and you like to do them quickly, like not something like that, like really, they're really disrespecting people when respect is important to you, or then it's okay to say, you know what, you can work somewhere else. That's okay. So thank you so much, Natalie. I'm really glad you asked that question, because I think it matters. And I didn't want people to have to answer that question on whether or not you're dealing with it, because I know we've all been in the situation where we have a leader who isn't dealing with it. And it's so frustrating. So as the leader, don't be that guy. Go deal with it. And it's the route we're not going to talk about today, but it's the difficult conversations route. That's the important thing to know, right? Like as a leader, you've got to be able to go in and have those difficult conversations. Oops, I seem to went backwards. So I'm going to move on to the next route. So we talked about knowing our role. And our role really is to be the keepers of the culture. That's our role. And we need to talk about where we're going. And I'm so happy we talked this morning about values, because I think that's really important. But I want to ask you these next things. Is your team clear on where you're going, how you want to get there, and what's important to you? And these are just for you. If the answer was no to that, have you been clear on it? Have you offered the clarity in that? Have you really been clear on where you're headed and what's important to you? And then last but not least, if you said yes to both of those, yay you, because that's really important. But what do you do to keep it top of mind for them? So what's keeping it in your mind? Remember I said at Magna, my managers talked about it all the time. They were like, Lisa, you got to get on the floor. It's important that you go out and be there for the employees. They should never have to come in the office and find you. Get out there. Like that was a reminder all the time. Go out, go out, go out. So that was part of where I needed to be. So just some questions to keep in your own mind. If someone does want to answer them, happy to do that. But and if you aren't sure, like if you're going, I'm not really sure, just go back and ask. Even if it's just your Toastmasters club, go back and ask. Do you guys know why we're here? Do you know what's important? I mean, at Toastmasters, we read the mission statement all the time, but some people don't know that there's values. So maybe have you talked about those recently? Has anybody brought them up at your meeting? So that's really important to know where we're going. And I like to give this picture. And when I think about our mission, vision, and values, it's the idea for me is that the vision is something, it's a picture that's at the far end of a road. So if you look at the picture on the screen, it's like where the light is at the end, right? Like we all want to get to the light at the end of this road. Our mission is how we're traveling the road and the road itself. And our values are the guideposts that are keeping us on that road. So I prefer for the guideposts to be out here because we want to have people to have creativity. So you want some wide guideposts and give people lots of room to play. But this is the way we keep everyone going in the same direction. And I was going to share a different story here, but it was too long. So I switched it up as I was going to sleep last night. So I was working with a company and there was about 15 of them and 3 leaders. So there was an executive director and 2 leaders. And then there was maybe about 15 total. And they were struggling with one employee. And that one employee, they thought it was a rub with one of the leaders. So I went in initially and I did some mediation. And then as I started talking to them, we figured out that there were some other problems going on with the group as a whole. So we did the mediation, and then I went in and I did a whole employee opinion survey with their team. And I did a full day where I went in and I talked to the staff and I said, okay, these are the answers that I'm concerned about where we kind of got low marks. I want to unpack those. So we did. We unpacked them, and then we came up with a bunch of things that they expected when they worked there. We then so I did that with just the staff. Then we brought the leaders back in, and the team as a whole came up with basically their version of the Magna Charter. And here's what happened. Once that came up, I could see in the room. So that person that I had said there was concerns about, and we'd had to do a mediation, in that room, she was trying to stir the pot. And so all day I was having to stop her from stirring the pot. So I saw it and I was like, wow, this is not good, right? Sometimes there's that one guy. So we got through the day though. We came up with these goals and these expectations of how everyone was going to deal with things. And one of them, and this is important because of this woman who was trying to stir the pot, one of them was, if you have a problem with someone in the team, you must speak to them within 24 hours, within reason. Please don't call people on the weekend, within reason. If someone's away, don't call them while they're off, kind of thing. But as soon as reasonably possible. And if you're both in the office, within 24 hours. If you have a problem with someone, you got to bring it up in 24 hours and you speak directly to the person that you have the issue with. That was one of their rules. There were some spaces for if you're really not comfortable, there was some, other ways to handle it. There was a third party or other things, but this was really important to this. Because that rule came into place, the girl that was stirring the pot could no longer stir the pot. No one would listen to her. They would say to her, go talk to that person, go talk to that person, go talk to that person. And she left very shortly after we did that day because the team stopped letting her do what she was doing. Then the leaders came, they did the leading with ease, and they started to work even more on that culture piece, making sure that they were being the keepers of that culture. So they kept that list, they brought it up at meetings, they really kept that culture. And they got another one. There was another one who was trying to stir the pot. Here she comes. It's a very female dominated workplace. Just when I'm saying women, it's not always women that stir the pot, just to be clear. It's not always us. It just happened in this place. It was a female dominated place. And so she was doing the same thing. And they had ingrained that culture so much that she wasn't able to stir the pot. She wasn't able to do it anymore because, again, the team went, nope, we're not putting up with that. And they didn't let her. And even when so they would kind of push back and say, no, you go talk to the other person or whatever. And when she kept trying, they went to the supervisor and they said, hey, she's doing this. And so then the supervisor brought her in and tried to get her back on track and dealing with what she was supposed to be doing. She couldn't see it. And she too eventually moved on. So they didn't have to get to the point where they went through all of the discipline process. The moment they started talking to her about it, it's not the way she wanted to work, and she moved on. And so I tell you this, I should have shared this as well, but I share this because when we're really clear, I'll come back to the culture. When we're really clear on, I don't know why that is in there. Yeah. About where we're going, the right people will join you. So the clearer you are about where you're going, the right people will join you. And sometimes you have to ask people to leave, and sometimes they'll just self-identify and go. So I think it's really important that we know this. Yeah, Sheris, yes, it is so very true. Yes, the more ingrained we are, they'll choose to leave on their own. So I just want to go back to that. And I'm sorry, I should have shared this earlier. Like I mentioned, I changed some things this morning. So my slides are now out of order. But just so when I'm talking about culture, we understand what I'm saying. It's a sum of informal and formal systems. So sometimes it's your policies and procedures, but it's also just the way people are allowed to behave. So those women that were stirring the pot, they were allowed to stir that pot. And then it's our behaviors, values, and that all creates an experience for both your clients and your staff. And I'll tell you that this place, it's female dominated because it's counselors. And so this is a counseling place. And I kept saying to them, your clients feel it when they walk in here. If you have a negative, toxic work environment, those clients will feel it when they walk in. So you can't have that. You've got to protect it. And so that's what they started to do. Counseling, huge now, very important, right?
Lisa.
Yeah.
Peggy had a question.
Oh, sorry.
The question was, what if it's a health and safety issue where the culture does not allow for people to raise valid issues? She said,
Yeah.
I've been there and people would agree with the pot stirrer initially and then change their mind when it looks like they may have to step out of their comfort zone.
Yeah. So I will say this, is that sometimes we have to decide that we're the person that needs to go to. And I wish, and I'm glad that Natalie asked that question earlier because I normally wouldn't bring up that company, but I wish that my biggest wish is that I'd known I should have left there sooner. There are other jobs out there. You belong somewhere where it's safe, because when it's a health and safety issue, you belong somewhere where it's safe. The story I was going to tell that was going to take too long was I worked at a company where we were #1 for deaths. We were killing people. It was very sad. The company rallied and they changed their culture, but it was a lot of work to change their culture. So it is important, especially when it's health and safety and stuff. Sometimes you have to be the one, you have to decide whether you're going to be the one to push the change or whether you're going to be the one who says, you know what, I'm not in a place here where I can do that. Thankfully, at that company where we were highest in deaths, I didn't have to be the one to make the change. They were a great company. They were gutted. They were gutted when they realized what was going on with how many employees were doing things unsafely. they were gutted by it, and they rallied and made the change. But it took a long time. The bigger you get, the harder it is to make the change. Yeah. Okay. So, so now we know if we aren't creating our culture, it'll be created for us. We know that when we're clear about where we're going, the right people are going to join us. And now I want to talk a little bit about knowing yourself. So I was going to share a couple of things, and I'll share them at the end because we only have about 17 minutes left. So I'll go through this one. And actually, I'm going to pause here and I'm going to ask a question. I want you to think about the best leader that you've ever worked for. And when you get them in your head, just sort of give me a wave or let me know. Just take a moment and think about the best leader you ever worked for. And I want you to think of the 3 characteristics that made them the best leader. So think of 3 things when you have that person in your head, when you think about them, you think they were this, this, and this, and that's what made them so great. And please share them in the chat. Willing to listen. Yep, that's always a big one. Fair. Love it. Respectful, open door. Love it. So as we're starting to see those come in, honest, love it, Cheris. Empathetic and supportive. As we're seeing all of these come into the chat, has anyone seen anything yet that is technical in nature? No. Because being a leader has nothing to do with our technical skills. It has nothing to do with it. We often take the best of whatever the skill is and we make them the leader, but that's not the skills. Oh, I love those values, encourage feedback, no matter how small your role. Love it. So we take that person, we put them in, and we think because they have the best technical skills, they'll be the best leader. That's not what it is. It's about having the softer skills, having those emotional intelligence skills. See, still more as more are coming in, none of them are anything to do with technical. I did this in a big room once, and there was like 100 to 200 of us there, and they gave us 3 sticky notes. And we stuck the sticky notes on one wall for technical skills and on the other wall for the emotional intelligence skills. Guess where all the sticky notes were? Yeah. Yeah. And so I just want to share that because when we get to the know yourself group, this is what I'm talking about. Having emotional intelligence starts with ourselves, right? Knowing ourselves, getting clear on who we are, and being okay with that. So I mentioned earlier that, kindness for me doesn't mean, doesn't look like when you're down. I mean, it does sometimes. I'll give you a hug, but if you're really struggling, I'll give you a hug. But I'm the person that you come to when you're ready for that push. Let's go. Let's get her going. That's me. I have others in my life who are the huggers, right? My mom is a hugger. When things are bad, I call my mom. She's going to give me a hug, right? So we have those people, and that's okay. We're both kind. We're just kind in our own way. And I used to feel bad. Oh, good. Yeah, Ellen's a hugger. I love hugs, but I'm just not the one who's going to be the one to start them. But so we need to be comfortable in who we are. So I'm going to just share a little story about that. So I was working at a job, and it was the first time in my career I had 10 people reporting to me. Human resources, we generally have 2 to 4-ish. And this was a much larger organization. I had 10 people reporting to me, and they were HR, health and safety, and publicity. So I'd never had publicity reporting to me before. I had no idea what they did. So I was like, okay, I got to really get to know people quickly. So how I'm going to used to be with 2 or 3 people, you just go out to lunch with each of them, right? And you get to know them. It's not hard. 10, it's going to take a lot longer. So I thought, okay, I'm going to shorten this. I'm going to take everybody out, and we did a DISC report. So I share that. A DISC report is a personality assessment. And we went in and we learned about each other and what each of us needs to be at our best. And one of the big lessons when you're doing something like that is that sometimes you need to be the person who's going to bend. So if I'm working with someone who's not like me, sometimes I have to shift to their way of thinking and their way of doing things. And sometimes they need to do it for me. And I had an employee working with me, and her name was Brett. She was short-haired, she was short in stature, but she was really tall on thoughtfulness, very thoughtful person. So prior to the meetings, she used to just come in and blurt a whole pile of stuff out. So just hands up if you really like details. All right. Yeah, that's not me. I hate details. I am not the person who wants to work with details at all. But Brett loved them, loved details. And she always knew all the details, which I mean was great because I never had to worry about them. But she also would come and tell me all the details. And I'm sure like prior to this meeting, she could see me like, come on, get to the point, you know, like I was like squirming when she'd come in. And so after the meeting, she realized that that wasn't my strength. And so she'd come and give me an abbreviated version of events until one day. And this one day I get a knock at my door and she pokes her head in and she says, Lisa, I have to tell you something and you need to listen to all the details. Would you like them now or after lunch? So she was giving me space to get my energy back up before I had to listen to all her details. And she continued that. She would always come in and offer. And so some days I would be like, you know what? Yeah, I'm good. And the other thing I did when she came in is I would physically get up from my desk and we'd go sit at another table so that I gave her my full attention. And then I was like, this is so awesome. Now, can you imagine working with someone? I call this managing up because she reported to me, but working with someone who got to know you so well that they came in and offered something like this. She gave me the space to have my energy back. And so, of course, I thought, okay, I've got to return the favor. So what I would do is when there was something new coming out from head office, I would just bring her into the meeting because she'd ask all the questions. One, it took the pressure off me, but for those of you who had your hand up that you like details, how awesome would that be to get your questions answered up front? I can see Jen and Peggy nodding. Yeah, right. So now I felt good because she had done a workaround for my personality, and she felt good because I did one for her. Her and I were really good at working together. And we had a really strong, I'll call it a really strong know yourself route. So she was comfortable in her details. I was comfortable in my lack of loving the details. I mean, I can do them, but it sucks my energy. And I know that. So we both took turns and did that bending and shifting. So, oops, because I was in the chat again. So another wisdom moment. Okay, when you know yourself, it's easy to know when to bend and when not to. And so, okay, I thought we had till 1:55. So I'm going to just flip to the now we know. So now we know if we aren't creating our culture, it's going to be created for us. When you're clear about where you're going, the right people will join you. And the better we know ourselves, the easier it is to know when to bend and also when not to, because sometimes you need to stand in who you are, and that's important. So I wanted to do so I wanted to do a giveaway, and here's how we're going to do this. I just gave you some information about my employee Brett, and I described her, and don't put your hands up yet, but here the giveaway is I created a course that goes with the book. It's called Beyond the Book. It's a series of videos that we delve into each section of the book. And so I want to give one of those away today. And just so we're clear, I'm going to ask the question now. I'll get you to put your hands up so we can move over. If you're the winner of it, though, please make sure I have your email so that I can get you your information before you leave. So tell me something about Brett. I described her. So if you have a thought, just put your virtual hand up so that we know who is first. All right, Debbie. All right, Debbie, tell me something about Brett.
You said she was short.
Yes. Beautiful. I was worried because people often say, they're often like, she doesn't like details. I'm like, yes. So I sometimes say, except for the details thing. So yes, short hair, short stature, but very tall in thoughtfulness. So Debbie, can you make sure I have your email before we sneak out? Because I know they're wanting us to be out in like 2 minutes.
Okay, sure.
And for everyone else, I also have a discount for the course. I wanted to do that today, is to give that away. So if you are interested in the course, we'll do the same thing. Just private message me in here and let me know if you're interested in the course. I normally sell it for $350. I'm going to do a 50% off. You will get access to a copy of the book. I would normally give you a hard copy. Obviously can't do that, but it's in the course. You'll get a PDF of the book and the course itself. And once you're in the course, you get a $250 discount to the longer version of the course. So thank you, Debbie, for sending your email. I will stay in here and get all those emails before I pop in over. If you have a question, feel free to ask as well. Sorry, I had to rush that a bit at the end. Thank you so much, Ellen, for keeping me on time. I appreciate it. And sorry for the bit of a rush at the end here, but if you do have a question, feel free to ask. Oh, and before you go, I will do this. I will get all of my information in the chat. Let me just stop sharing. I'll get all of my information in the chat so you can connect with me afterwards, and feel free to ask any questions that you want to. And I do have a 20-minute, you can do a discovery call with me for 20 minutes. So I'll put that link in there too. And then as we're sneaking up, my apologies. I like to chat and I like to answer questions. I shared far more information than I planned to. So, but there you go. There's all my information. And I'm going to stay here and I will pull all of these emails to make sure that you get that discount.